Hey guys, before we start the video, there are two things I want to talk about. The first is, I want to thank you all for 10,000 subscribers. I'm recording this off script, so there'll be a lot of mumbling and stuttering as per usual with me when I'm going off script, but I really appreciate it. I couldn't imagine a time when I'd even get 100 subscribers. See, there I am, stuttering my words, never mind 10,000, so thank you guys so much. More Berserk content's incoming, and I plan to do more stuff outside of Berserk if you guys want to see that. So, yeah, some Vinland Saga stuff I'm gonna do when the anime hits on Sunday. So look forward to that, and I'll keep making the content you guys like, I guess. And the next thing is, I actually have a sponsor for this video, which is very exciting. So I'll let that play out, and then after that, just enjoy the rest of the video. Hey guys, before we start the actual video, I wanted to share a quick update with you. I love making Berserk videos primarily on this channel, but there are a lot of ideas that I can't dedicate full videos to. Emino reached out to me about their app, which lets people join various communities based on their favourite hobbies, and my favourite part, posting stories about certain topics. These stories don't disappear like other apps, and are a great way to share some smaller topics regarding anime, video games, and many more. I've partnered with Emino to share some of my very own stories, which wouldn't fit into their own videos. You can check out this one of my favourite designs in Berserk right now. I will continue posting Berserk stories over there, and for the upcoming Vinland Saga anime, so stay tuned to my Emino profile for more. Click the link in the description or pinned comment to download Emino, or search Emino apps in the App Store, and find my stories by searching Spired. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the video. Again, click the link in the description or pinned comment to download Emino. And let's continue on. Berserk is a series which is strongly defined by the landmark events which usually cap off each arc, be it the Eclipse, Griffith's Rebirth, or the Astral Merge. I have talked about these events extensively in my previous videos, but Berserk is much more than these key events. Berserk also exceeds on a chapter per chapter basis. Say what you will about the hiatuses, but I feel that each chapter is rife with key parts of a story which help define Berserk, be it character moments, great action, or a bit of both. In today's video, I'd like to talk about my favourite chapter in the series, chapter 129, set in the Conviction arc, titled Cracks in the Blade. What is the content of this chapter which makes it my favourite? Does it have cool action, major lore revelations? None of that, in fact. The meat of this chapter is simply Guts having a conversation with an old, dying blacksmith. I'll be going through this chapter on a page-by-page basis, much like the approach I took with the Grunbeld novel, but unlike that pile of shite, here I want to talk about how great this chapter is. This chapter is set right off the cuff of Lost Children, and Guts' first interaction with Farnese and the Holy Iron Chain Knights. As a quick reminder, Guts is still in his Black Swordsman persona, fueled by thoughts of revenge on behalf of the fallen Hawks, and to satiate his hatred against the Apostles. However, Guts has demonstrated some cracks in this persona of his, finally accepting Puck as a real companion, and his previous actions against Rosine, hesitating to kill her throughout Lost Children, were such moments, and Crack in the Blade is Guts being confronted on his Black Swordsman behaviour, and what it's actually led to. After Guts receives a premonition from the Demon Child that Casca is in some sort of danger, he rushes over to Godo's cabin where she has been residing for the last 2 years for her own protection. At least, that's what Guts has internalized this as. The chapter begins with Erica cutting down some wood. She captures a dancing Puck, but just after that she encounters Guts for the first time in 2 years. What I love about this panel is the contrast between Guts and Erica, and how it flips her Black Swordsman persona on its head. Erica flinches before noticing Guts, and the scale shown between Guts and Erica here is masterfully done. If you showed this panel out of context to someone, Guts would look like the villain here, shrouded in darkness with only his remaining eye illuminated. It's consistent with his current persona of the Black Swordsman. But then something different happens. Guts greets Erica with a smile, and even commenting of how she's grown a bit taller. Erica beams a smile back upon seeing an old friend for the first time in 2 years. Think about when Guts interacted with that young boy in Lost Children. He was a means to an end, just to lure out Rosine's pseudo-apostles out. Guts was acting cold and calculating, as expected for how his current mental state was. Even with Jill, he didn't share this level of engagement and interest with her. If anything, he wanted her to stay away from him, purely because of the Black Swordsman persona he shrouded himself in. Guts showing respect and kindness for an old friend is a huge step in the right direction for the character post-Eclipse. This same attitude is applied in the next pages, when Guts meets Rickert for the first time after 2 years. Commenting on how much stronger Rickert looks, Guts is displaying a level of care for his old friends that doesn't seem natural based on what he's been through for the past 2 years as the Black Swordsman. As much as he loves his friends in the Hawks, his revenge quest was really the only thing on his mind. As Rickert is asking Guts where he's been for these past 2 years, Guts cuts Rickert off to ask one major question: if Casca is safe. Look at Guts' facial expression here, and compare it to the panels whilst he was in his Black Swordsman persona. Instead of a face of twisted hatred, it is one of a sense of duty and responsibility, cementing the idea that Casca is the most important person in Guts' life, and is the key of pulling him out of such hatred. Even when Rickert tells Guts that Casca has gone missing, Guts' reaction and composure is a lot different compared to before. He's not so much filled with anger, but genuine worry. Sure, he pins Rickert upon hearing this news, but look at this panel here. He's sweating, grinding his teeth, and filled with a genuine panic. More emotions are overflowing, rather than hatred. What really sells this scene for me is Erika's reaction. She bursts into tears and explains that she couldn't bear to see Casca trapped in the elven cave, so went to take her to go fruit picking, in which she somehow escaped from Erika's line of sight. Guts snaps at Rickert saying, why isn't he looking for Casca right now? Erika, rightfully, calls him out on this. What about Guts, and what he did? For the past 2 years, Guts went off on a quest with seemingly no end, chasing an impossible goal for Godhand, and most importantly, Griffith, who didn't even reside in the physical realm at this time. Instead of grieving with the people who were still there to support him, he cast aside what he loved for a twisted goal of revenge. Rickert did the complete opposite and the right course of action. Erika explains he looked for Casca again and again, but the most important thing is he returned home to Erika and Godo, his new family. Rickert wasn't there in the eclipse, but the Hawks meant just as much to him as they did to Guts. Instead of casting himself aside in hatred and despair, he surrounded himself with people to help his heart heal. I don't want to repeat myself too much about Rickert, so I'd suggest watching my Importance of Rickert video if you want to know deeper thoughts about the character. Rickert explains to Guts there's a reason he can't leave, and that's where we get to the meat of this chapter. Guts goes into the attic and sees a dying Godo. When Guts asks the cause, Godo simply replies it is due to old age. He asks to see Guts' equipment, and notices all the battle damage that has been done to it, which shouldn't be this way even after 10 years, never mind 2. Godo begins to relate Guts' own equipment damage to his mental state. It's a really good analogy which works on 2 levels. The first is that Godo is a blacksmith, so of course he's going to make these sort of observations through his work. It's not like a Grunbeld novel where the word dragon is said without no rhyme or reason. Godo has been characterised of living vicariously through his work, and that is all he's ever known. The second is that because of this, Godo acts as a way for both reader and Guts himself to analyse Guts' behaviour up to this point. Godo notices Guts' facial expression of how much more tense it is than the last time that they met. These 2 years as a Black Swordsman have left a heavy toll on Guts, so much so that even Godo can notice this from Guts' demeanour alone. Godo makes a educated guess that Guts is waging war against demons based on their previous experience with a Boar Apostle 2 years prior. What I love about this is what Godo says next. He comments that he doesn't even know if waging war against apostles is even the right thing to do, and gives one suggestion which marks the beginning of Guts reassessing himself and his actions. Listen, why not run away from war, from hatred? The next panel of Guts reacting to this statement is masterful, simply staring at Godo with a vacant but almost inquisitive stare. It's not that Guts is angry that Godo made this statement, but he's confused, because to Guts right now, running away from war was never an option. He created a narrative in his head that going on a hatred-fueled quest to kill all apostles would somehow avenge the Hawks. It's not that Guts didn't consider any options, but he was so caught up in hunting the demons to get to the God Hand that he himself didn't believe that there were any other options. Godo then goes on to explain his interpretation of hatred. He equates that hatred is the place that people who can't look sorrow in the eye run off to. Guts was unable to face the distress of losing the Hawks, and work through the pain with those who were left. He was too afraid to face the truth of the actions, and more importantly, mourn them. Godo then goes on to equate this with another blacksmith analogy, that vengeance is something that you soak and sharpen in blood, by sinking the blade called your heart in blood to fix the nicks called sorrow, but the more you sharpen it, the more it rusts, so you keep repeating this action until all that's left is a pile of scraps. Guts wanted to get rid of a sorrowful feeling by concealing himself in hatred, but what did that actually accomplish? That feeling of sorrow never went away. He spent 2 years killing countless apostles as a form of coping mechanism for what happened at the eclipse. This isn't going to bring the Hawks back, and Guts' mental state and what he was doing as a Black Swordsman isn't a good tribute for their memory either. But those feelings never went away, so instead of evaluating his actions, he just did it again and again and again. As Godo says, the more you sharpen, the more it rusts, and all that is left for Guts is a pile of scraps, with cracks called fear running all through it. Look at Guts' reaction to when Godo equates Guts' current state to fear. It's almost as if Guts is playing right into Godo's analogy. Gone is the stoic, inquisitive look of a hardened warrior, and now we are looking at a terrified young man who, for the first time in 2 years, is really evaluating his actions. Guts responds back to Godo's words, saying that no one understands what he's going through, and I absolutely love this panel of Guts' facial expression here. A crazed look on his face, sweating profusely, and gnashing his teeth together, Guts is facing a sorrow head-on after Godo's exchange, and the body language that Miura demonstrates in this panel is reflective of that. Guts, in a crazed state, says to Godo that the Hawks just died suddenly, and that's it. None of it made sense, and the people who he cared for most in the world died like insects, without understanding anything which was going on. Guts has a terrible case of survivor's guilt here, saying that they could have done something with their lives if they lived, and to him, well, they were irreplaceable. The last 2 pages of this chapter are what cements this as my favourite chapter in Berserk. Godo picks up on Guts saying the Hawks were irreplaceable, and rightfully points out that Guts abandoned these irreplaceable things. Guts, in his suffering, went alone, and left the last irreplaceable thing he had, Casca. The horrors of the eclipse affected Guts so much that he thought he had lost everything, that hunting apostles alone would somehow honour his fellow Hawks' memories, because he had nothing left at this point. His irreplaceable friends were gone, but they weren't. Casca was still alive, Rickert too even. Godo points out that he was right beside those irreplaceable things, but instead of immersing himself in sorrow with Casca, he ran away from tackling these emotions so that his own malice could burn. Godo continues by saying, does Guts even have any place criticising Rickert, who he left alone? Does Guts have any place talking about the revenge for his friends, when he was the one who abandoned Casca, one of the few he cared for who was left? No matter how you slice it, Guts chose what he did for those 2 years. For selfish desires, he chose himself, and to rely on fighting to fulfill some sick mission of hunting the apostles to find the God Hand, and it was all for nothing. Instead of looking inwards and immersing himself in healing his heart with those who were left, he continued to form the cracks of fear in his heart again and again. Godo finishes the chapter with his haunting message. You're like a drawn sword on the battlefield, one with countless nicks, soaked in blood and rusting, with a lethal crack in it, a sword that's begun to break. Notice Godo's wording here, begun. Although Guts' actions for these past 2 years have been a sad and twisted tale, he's not completely far gone yet. We've seen this through his times with Black Swordsman that there is still some humanity inside him, and to equate a blacksmith analogy in honour of Godo, he just needs to be reforged. Cracks in the blade demonstrates a turning point in Berserk. It was a much needed wake up call for Guts to evaluate himself and his actions, and using Godo as a proxy to highlight this was very well played by Miura. It's a much needed character shift for Guts. He couldn't remain a revenge fueled maniac forever, and the somber but effective way of how Miura showed Guts to actually internalize this change for himself, with a conversation with a dying blacksmith, and that is what cements this as my favourite chapter in Berserk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.